Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay. Okay.
The Bible is just about as long as it is possible for any document to be.
For fuck's sake! They want to go ahead and they want to take this idea and talk about that as if it's real, as if that's what's real.
This is insane. Look at this vastness.
Hello and welcome to the Lion Ghost Show, June 16th, 2013. And today's topic for today is morality and objective morality, I suppose. And today we have Johan Ratz, Jade Binder, Patrick Thacker, and James Stillwell. You guys there?
I'm here.
Yeah, you could unmute yourself now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Here.
I'm here.
Welcome, everyone.
So Johan, tell us about your objective morality.
Morality?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see here. Actually, I have a Facebook note on. Let's see if I can dig it up. Basically, what I do is I say, let's start from just kind of ground zero, and base zero, and say, let's assume we're not even discussing objective morality for a second, but we'll say is everyone here has their own morality, right? Subjective to them, their own concept of what's right and wrong.
Panel?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and so maybe I would disagree with some of your things, maybe you disagree with some of my things, maybe you would disagree with each other on points. But the interesting thing in all these cases, everything that we do here is we always have all the moralities are framed in terms of either good or bad, or right or wrong, or positive, negative, that kind of thing, right? It's kind of got a binary structure to it. So what I then do is I say, and this is kind of how I bridge the is-ought gap. That is kind of like, that point is kind of meta-ethics, right? It's not like saying that anything about morality itself. It's saying about something about the nature of morality, not the actual rules or way to fall out of it, what meta-ethics is, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's more of a meta-ethical level. Then what I do is I say, okay, so these moral statements we have, or moral concepts we have, and people have been talking about how to bridge the is-ought gap for a long time, but the bottom line of it is that they exist, right?
The gap?
Yeah, and so because that they are, by that nature, part of the is, in the broadest logical, broadest sense.
Isn't the is definition?
I mean, in the is-ought gap sense, so if someone says something is one way doesn't mean it ought to be that way. And there's a kind of a way to bridge that in a very generic way, in that whatever, all of our oughts, all of our individual oughts are part of a larger is, which is, existence itself, a big logical system of all of existence, right? And so what I then argue is that you've heard of Kant, Immanuel Kant. He had this statement, just kind of a basis for his objective morality, where he said that only act on that maxim which you could also universally maximize. So that means that let's say that I think murder is good, okay? And so then I go out and I imagine murdering everyone. Well, the problem is that if I universalize that, everyone else is going to be using my axiom, my premise, and they're going to be murdering everyone too, which could include me, right? But that will cancel out my ability to continue on my logos, right? My or telos rather.
Right. You're talking about his categorical imperative.
Right. And so therefore, since I cannot continue on the, my action, or the universalization of the statement, murder is good, will actually contradict itself in the end. It'll prevent itself from being carried out, because someone will kill me, and that that telos is actually self-defeating, basically. And so maybe then more specifically, you could say that someone's telos, a finer tuned thing, someone's telos maybe, that isn't immediately obvious like murder, it may have something to do with, it may contradict the telos of the species.
Can you please define what telos means?
Telos is like your end goal, or your,
You mean your ends?
Your purpose.
Your purpose.
But isn't a purpose question begging?
Well, no, the purpose is just what you have. Everyone has a purpose, right? That's the whole point of morals. Like that, someone has a set of oughts that they follow, that they want to pursue.
Well,
They think something.
Isn't that subjective?
Well, that's what we're getting at. I'm saying that it is subjective in a metaphysical or ontic sense, and yet we can derive it as being objective in a kind of epistemic sense. Just because it's even if it's subjective, you still have to, you can still conceive of subjective values being universalized in such a way that they either conflict with themselves internally or don't conflict with themselves internally. And by do this by conflicting with the larger system they're in as well.
So you're saying you first have to value consistency.
Yes, although the value itself would value consistency, because otherwise the value would devalue itself otherwise.
You seem to you seem to be under the illusion that there are values.
Well, there are. I mean, that's just what, even if you're a relativist or a nihilist.
No, there are valuers, and we decide for ourselves what has value, but value doesn't exist out there in some things.
Well, you would still have when I say a value, I mean like a telos. Your telos, what you value, I mean, let's just assume it's not out, the value isn't out there or something for a second. Let's just say it's
mental.
It's mental, but it's still a value there in your head, right?
But it's just in your head and nothing more.
Right, I'm saying
right,
that,
but your head, like, remember that video? I think you made this video, James. You said, like, my objective brain.
yeah.
Basically, it's like that. Yes, it's just in your head, but your head, your brain, is part of the larger system, and so in a sense, you can kind of universalize it as though it is out there, just because, well, values have to exist in your head, and so whatever, something contradicts your head, therefore contradicts your values, your objective existence of your brain or whatever. Like, you say the statement murder is good, everyone goes around shooting each other in the head. Well, the shoot each other in the head, well, that puts an end to values right there.
Right, well, it's really kind of irrelevant to me whether something can be applied universally. Because first off, who says we ought to apply it universally? And secondly, that only makes a universal value, not or consistent, but not an objective value.
Can we please distinguish between objective, because the word objective could be thrown around a little bit. So.
Well, okay, so what I mean by objective is that it's independent of the valuer.
So it's indifferent to you.
No, okay, assuming that there is a reality external to us, that reality would be objective. It would be independent of our likes, feelings, wants, desires, all that stuff, okay?
Like the idea of the universe. It does
right.
as it doesn't give a shit about you.
Even if it does give a shit, it's still there whether you like it or not.
Well, yes.
Okay? Or objective, object. It's not the subject. So, if you're saying that there's some sort of oughtness floating external to us, I just think that's quite absurd.
Well, what I'm arguing is that there wouldn't be, but so yes, morality is subjective to people. The thing is that it's intersubjective, and so like 1 + 1 = 2 or mathematics, they're subjective concepts, right? I mean, they're the concepts that the minds have to contain them, right? And yet the thing, what?
I'm not sure. What do you mean minds have to contain them?
Like it's an idea, and an idea has to be in a mind, right?
You're saying one object plus another object is a concept?
No, the like the natural numbers themselves, not like the
What's a
Okay, so like the symbols.
Application of the natural number. Yeah, just it's 1 + 1
Yeah.
= 2, or
All right, I can buy that.
a Hilbert space, or what have you. These are like, mathematical objects, and so they, if you want to use the word object for them, I guess, but they're dependent on, they exist because the mind is having them, right?
Okay.
And so the thing is that in that sense they are subjective because they only exist inside of subjects, right?
Numbers are kind of, I mean,
No.
if I remember correctly, numbers are like something like are universal, aren't they?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is that
But
even though it's,
they're universal because they're based on, like, you can count 2 rocks using whatever you want to call it. And
right.
You get, 2 rocks from having 2 1 rocks.
I guess what I would say then, basically what I'm aiming at here, the end point of this, is that I would view morality as intersubjective, such that if you reasoned about it long enough, everyone could be able to come to the same morality, and so it would be objective in an epistemic sense, even though it has a subjective existence inside of a mind.
You're saying that reason will bring you to certain values.
Yeah. For example.
That has
Sounds very enlightened.
Wait, I got a question, and that is, what is reason?
Well, reasoning in the sense of, you can, like, apply reason.
Are you talking about deduction?
Deduction, yeah. Well, deduction based on, maybe a little bit of induction, too, of, what's best for your species or whatever, which then probably relies on, some broader telos for life itself or whatever, but...
Why should I care about what's good for my species?
Because you are part of your species.
So?
Why happens if you want to kill all your species?
Why not kill myself? Why shouldn't I kill myself?
That would contradict that. That's actually interesting because Kant used that as an example. That's one of his. He has I forget what it was, a essay on suicide, and he was saying that basically if you kill yourself, you're the valuer. The value is essentially you kill yourself based on your value, but then your value dies with the valuer, and so the value is essentially contradicting itself. It's bringing about its own non-existence.
So what? Who says I ought to value contradiction?
A is bringing about not A, and therefore there's a contradiction.
Who says I should value non-contradiction, consistency?
Well, the value is, basically, okay. So here's how to put it.
I don't think you can use logic in morality, because morality, in my opinion, would be more of an instinctual basis instead of.
It has an instinctual existence, yes, but you can even apply logic to deduce things about instinct or.
Johannan, do you really want me to quote one of my favorite quotes from
Nietzsche?
David Hume?
From who?
David Hume.
Go ahead.
"'Tis not contrary to reason to prefer the destruction of the whole world to the scratching of my finger, because 'tis not contrary to reason, but merely unusual." So in other words, there are normative things that we most likely will value, but it's not contrary to reason whether we value them or not. Values have nothing to do with reason.
Right,
reason
that was
is a tool to help you,
reach your values.
Right.
Yeah. Like, is this an example, James? We value water, not because of reasoning, but because we require it, right?
Well, it's more like we don't want to die. We have the goal that we don't want to die. Reason tells us if you don't drink water, you will die. And we say, well, I want to die, therefore, or I don't want to die, therefore I ought to drink water.
But is it reason telling you that?
No, it's instinct.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I would argue that is instinct. It's not reason. It's just like there are certain things that are basic. It's, eating is an instinct. Drinking is an instinct. Sex is an instinct.
Like for example, when you're happy, you smile. Like that. Well, you most likely will. Like it's an instinct when you're smiling. Your instinct is you're happy.
Right, and it probably comes from if you look at our primate relatives, they also it's sort of a grimace as a way of, expressing things.
Communication.
Different forms of communication. There are some things that are just inherent within us. We do have instincts. We just tend to not think of ourselves as having instincts. We think of ourselves as reasoned, logical human beings. And forget our lizard brain.
We do use reason.
We do use reason, but we also have our.
The thing is, though, like reason brings us science and stuff, but the thing is, it does not give us actually what ought to do or what
Right. And,
to do.
Right.
It just gives us things to use in any means we want. So, we have the choice of using a nuclear bomb, nuclear power to blow up the world or to power it. We have that, dilemma.
Right.
right.
So like in the future, science could enable us to live 1,000 years, but science cannot tell us whether we ought to live 1,000 years or not.
Yeah, that's your own choice,
Yeah.
technically. I mean, unless it's forced on you, but that's a completely different thing.
But it also may be a societal choice. What happens to society if everybody lives 1,000 years and we keep reproducing?
That would be an example of the categorical imperative.
Yeah.
If it's universalized and therefore.
Oh.
Right.
Well,
that's what I was getting at with the consistency thing is, James, is, if you, let's say you value A, okay, right? If value A, then by definition, you will not also value not A or anti-A, right?
Right.
However, if in the instantiation of A, you bring about not A, then your valuing of A will actually be valuing of not A, right?
Okay, so what's your point?
So my point is that you should not be, by your own subjective morality, you should not value not A. That's not me telling you should value not A, but your own morality itself telling you that you should not value not A.
Isn't that trying to say you ought to value A and not A?
Yeah, but I'm saying is that if A necessarily logically leads to not A by simply the logical system that it's in, it has to lead to not A, then not A will be immoral from within your own value set. Simply because it will lead...
What is your value set, though, to begin with?
A. It's A. A in this term is actually, would therefore be a contradiction of, like an internal logical contradiction.
But morality contradicts each other all the time, sometimes.
Sometimes.
I mean, I know,
but that's kind of the point.
I would say it does, like war. Like, would you say war contradicts the morality of a peaceful society?
That may be an argument to have for, like, to say that not all wars are just then, right?
Well,
there is some set of rules by which...
I'm saying if that's A, if A is peaceful society and B is war, I mean, if not A is war, then don't they contradict each other?
If A is war and
A not A, if pretty much if the opposite of peace is war, not A,
right?
Don't those contradict each other?
Yeah, they would contradict each other. Peace and war would contradict each other, but you could live out in peace to the extent that you could, and it may be like the grounds for like a just war theory or something. And so, if you could not universalize, for some weird, bizarre reason, you could not universalize peace, it would lead to its own destruction. Peace would somehow lead to war automatically. Then,
hey, well, Reyes, do you drive?
Not right now. I have my light. Well, yeah, not now.
Oh,
I got out of college with zero debt, and that's why.
So you have driven before, huh?
Yeah, but I just don't have. Yeah, I don't have a car right now.
How would it work if everybody in the world got in your car? That wouldn't work, would it?
No.
So you ought not drive then.
Right, but you can set up that wouldn't necessarily be a contradiction.
What about your shower?
You could have a law that says everyone should use only their own car, or cars that they loan to their friends or whatever.
Oh.
It doesn't necessarily a contradiction there because we have a society that most people own cars, and there's no internal logical contradiction there, except for accidents where say someone either wasn't looking what they're doing or disobeyed traffic laws or whatever.
What about accidents?
Well, accidents would be things outside. That wouldn't be moral per se in nature. That's just
It's not intentional, is what you're
not
saying.
intentional. Yeah, you're not. No one's trying to.
What happens if like a person's drinking? Ought they not drink if they want to drive?
Yeah, that would probably follow then, because they would. If everyone drank and drove, they would all have car accidents with each other and destroy their own cars, and therefore defeat the purpose of.
Aren't there people who could drive drunk? I mean, it depends on the blood alcohol level.
Maybe. I mean, in that case, of course, our laws aren't as specific as to go to that point, simply because we don't have.
Well, we can't have people drinking because there are people out there that have one sip, they'll have negative consequences. So therefore, everyone ought not to drink.
Well, that's where it gets into, this is where Korsgaard comes into Kant, right? Kant was saying, well, it's illogical because it leads to these contradictions, right? And so the thing is, people have different contexts they're operating from, right?
Yeah.
One person gets drunk at like one sip, other person can drink all night and never gets drunk, right? And so
Sure.
Korsgaard,
I get what you're saying, and I don't want you to go on some elaborate thing, but because I understand it probably a lot better than you think I do.
Okay.
I've read a lot of Kant, right?
okay,
Okay, so what I'm saying here is, yeah, you can do that. You can find something universal, like you ought not torture babies for your own personal pleasure. I'm sure we could, think of that being applied to every situation. No one ever ought to torture infants for their personal pleasure.
Isn't an ought, though, adding a value to it?
Huh?
Like you said, value does not exist, but isn't an ought statement adding value to it?
I think that's what people call a duty when you talk about oughts.
Yeah.
There's moral value and moral duties. That's a distinction I see a lot.
But why ought I do my moral duty?
Right.
That's the billion-dollar question.
I was getting there, but
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
trying to
Go
show
ahead.
him that, yes, I'm agreeing with him that you can take things and apply them universally and it'll work. I mean, as far as consistency. But who says we ought to be consistent? Who says that we ought to do these things? I mean, just because you have a universal value, that is a value that can be applied consistently, who says we ought to do that? That's what I don't understand here.
well, the thing that comes
Where
back
are you
to
getting
that.
the objective? When is the objective morality going to come into play?
It's an epistemic object. It's not like a metaphysical or ontic objectivity. It's a epistemic one, which is, since everyone has oughts, then, if ought leads to not ought, that particular ought is flawed in some sense, even from its own perspective.
How so?
Because if you value A, then you do not value, or you are against the value of not A. But if A leads to not A, then A is against itself.
So I'm against North Korea, therefore I hate all communists?
No,
Maybe it's more like if you
rule.
value life, then you implies you don't value death. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah,
Life is better than death in a sense.
Yeah.
I value life, therefore I negatively value death.
right.
Or I don't value death. And that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, but that's not exactly morality, is it?
That's just
Well,
saying
yeah.
that you do value something. It doesn't say why you ought to value it.
Like, what's your
Well,
reason?
Oh no, what I'm
I think
saying
that-
is.
I think the thing is,
Okay. In that sense, yeah. I mean, like, I'm not disagreeing that, like, your values. I'll just put it like this. The oughts exist in a sense. They're. How do I put this? Basically, when you think of an ought, you're thinking of a command or something, right? And maybe your value is you're proceeding from your value as some kind of. Your value is itself the ought. That's what I'm getting at. The value kind of justifies itself or contradicts itself.
Oh, okay.
You're
So,
saying values produce oughts?
And
Is that
so
kind of what you're saying?
yeah. And so values produce oughts, and so then the value that contradicts itself, obviously, on its own grounds, has to be thrown out because it's not
Like,
itself.
If I value life, then I ought to help babies
Yeah,
and ought not torture and kill babies. That's kind of what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Okay.
okay, so if I like the taste of babies, then I ought eat infants.
Well, if everyone did that, then you would never reach the point where you are now because you were once an infant.
but
so
no,
what's-
but he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
He's not talking about anybody else's thing. He's talking about his own thing.
Right.
I would like to bring something in here that I mentioned in the chat. There is a science fiction novel called Courtship Right by Donald Kingsbury. In this novel, humans settled on another planet where most of the foliage is poisonous to humans, and they can only eat a few things. and they actually developed an organized form of cannibalism because they still have like these vats that they can grow, fetuses in. And so baby eating is actually common. They have a cannibalistic society because it is the only way they can survive. And so in this particular society, baby eating is just fine.
A little caveat to add is, just because I like babies doesn't mean I should necessarily eat them, because
Right.
not all conditionals exist in a vacuum.
Right.
I may like babies, but I also may like living in a world where other people aren't shunning me. So if I were just to gobble babies left and right, that would kind of annoy everybody around me, right? Or it would make it very hard to reproduce in certain senses. So not all values exist in a vacuum unto themselves. They kind of compete with each other for priority, is one way to look at it.
Right.
That's kind of like what I would have to say with morality. And since morality, in my opinion, is us questioning instinct at the basis. Also, someone's calling me. That was weird. Oh, okay, go on.
Sorry, who was talking? I think Jade was talking.
Yeah, Jade? I'm not going to invite...
Sorry, I had a mouthful of popcorn there. Well, yeah, I was just mentioning, in response to what Rat said, that, eating babies would not be good because you wouldn't have grown up to be an adult. But yes, it's a theoretical example, but there was an example of a society that actually really did eat babies because that was necessary for their survival, and they thought nothing about having a stuffed roast baby for dinner.
I mean, if they do it, that means they're okay with it,
That's
much.
right. Well, they have to. It became necessary for their survival, and so they're fine with it. They think nothing of it.
Well, let's suppose in that hypothetical, and
Hey, other animals do it.
They do what?
They eat their own young.
Well, like crocodiles?
Well, they're like...
I know lions will do it.
They do.
When a dominant lion takes over a pride, it'll basically kill and eat the young of the
but
other
it's not
female.
its young, though.
Right.
But I think we're talking about does any animal eat its own young?
Yes, there are rodents who eat their young. Hamsters.
I think you said, rats may do it under certain
Bears do it.
conditions.
I know crocodiles do, but that's after the legs have been ate and the female looks for food. And if it finds the babies, it'll eat it because it's hungry enough.
Well, let's think of it this way, and of course, the example may be gets super complicated when you try and actually, instantiate out and figure out if this will lead to logical contradiction at some point. But, once you get to like Korsgaard, right, and she was bringing up this concept of identity. It's consistent with so-and-so's identity, and if it contradicts their identity, then, it's not good anymore. And so then, where do you go from there? Well, you go to, identity in the broad sense, you go to Aristotle's logos, which is, what's good for a species, right? And so it may be that if you were to, maybe it's good for that particular society, but maybe if you instantiate that, like, to a very broad degree, like, say, the Aztecs, right, where they were, sacrificing people every, day or whatever. In the broad sense, that may lead to, say, the Spaniards not liking it, and then, of course, that's not what the Spaniards did, but, or the other tribes didn't like them very much for it, and so that may eventually lead to their own destruction because they're being attacked by other societies that...
But wait, they didn't lead themselves to destruction. It was that other people destroyed them.
Right, but the thing is that that's the broader logical system, the broader logos. They're part of humanity on the whole. There may have be a
What was
society.
the example again?
The Aztecs, like, sacrificing people or something.
Didn't
like
the
that.
Aztec get destroyed by the Spanish?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
So how exactly were they destroyed by other tribes? I mean,
No. That's not. I was giving a hypothetical. If
I
they
thought
were.
this was like history.
It was semi-historical. It was kind of a hypothetical though, extending that.
Well, what would happen if everyone...
Here's one. Here's the Spartans, right? You know about the Spartans, how they fell, right?
They fell?
Eventually, yeah, they fell
weren't they conquered by the Macedonians?
I think it was. Hold on here.
The weird thing is, when I took history in high school, all I remember is we talked about it, Athens and Sparta, then we moved on to Alexander the Great. That's just all I remember.
It was a slave rebellion. They had a whole.
Oh no, you're thinking of Spartacus.
No, I think there was. I read this somewhere.
I
it
think you're
was
speaking
history
about
book.
Spartacus, honestly.
No, it was a Greek society that it was very military. I thought it was pretty certain it was Sparta. It was militaristic, and it conquered a lot of people and then used them all as slaves, right? And as they kept doing this institutional slavery, which was good for their local
Sparta
society.
was conquered by Athens.
Whatever, just pretend it's hypothetical and finish your example.
I know there was one example, and I was pretty sure it was in Greece, way back thousands of years ago, and they had a whole lot of slaves, and eventually there were so many, so they started taking so many slaves that their instantiation of their value of slavery eventually led to their own demise because the slaves eventually got sick of it and then destroyed the whole civilization.
That sounds...
Helot slave revolt, I think it was. I don't know.
Doesn't seem... Okay.
Was there any actual objectivists?
So was the point, though, that slaves don't do slavery because it'll bite you in the ass later?
Yeah. Your instantiating of that value will at some point come around and, bite you in the butt.
Oh, so it's consequentialism.
Yeah, that's
it's connected. It's connected.
Subjective morality. At the end
If you
of the
don't-
day.
It's connected. I know, but remember I said that it was, metaphysically subjective, but epistemically objective.
If you don't want X, you ought not do Y.
But the thing is, though, you don't know that X was going to happen.
Well, you could probably. I mean, if you
why?
were a god or something, you had or just a very wise person probably thinks it at some point.
Like there was a reason why the Egyptians did not you guys know of the inventions that we've found and Alexandrian library, the remains of it, like this spinning steam wheel thing, the thing that pretty much could have been the steam engine.
A steam engine?
Yeah, pretty much. They didn't develop it because they didn't need it. They had tons of workers. They had working force. There was no need for no need for machinery in a sense. Who? Okay. But ought they stop using workers and ought they use machines?
Well, if they use slaves, it may at some point lead to their downfall in the long grand scheme of things.
But if it doesn't?
Well, let's suppose that I could take the bite the bullet approach on this, and let's say that maybe hypothetically, for maybe not our species, but maybe some other species out there or something, maybe it is in their logos to do that. And actually, I may have to bite the bullet and say that's good then in that case. But
you mean to be subservient?
Or to justify it under some kind of circumstance like that, like some alien race that has to enslave some other species or something, because that's just.
Well, we do that right now.
Here's
we
an
eat
example.
meat, right?
The Untouchables.
Chicken.
Oh yeah, we eat chicken and meat. Yes, that may be an example where that's actually good to do because it's in our logos and our logos does not contradict, and so that may seem unpleasant, but it may be good in that sense.
How do you know what the thing is? What's a logos? I'm sorry if that.
Logos is like the natural order of a species.
And how do we know what the natural order of the species is?
Well, that's where you would turn to science, I guess, and you'd have sociobiology, or how zoologists will study social groups of say meerkats or ants or any colony of organisms.
But
right?
are humans predictable?
I'd say they are.
To an extent, but there's randomness.
There is randomness, and there's randomness in all species too. But I think let's suppose that you were like a non-human alien from some other star system, right? And you just popped in here and started examining humans. To you, pretty much everything, not everything, with the random details, but most of our patterns of life would be very predictable and biological.
Because we humans nowadays have a set of patterns. We have a schedule. People get up, they drink their coffee, they go to work, they come home, they go to bed. It would seem repetitive, but over time it would be different.
To some extent, probably just because we evolved technologically. I'm getting feedback, James.
Not for me.
Any comment, James?
Oh, okay. It's gone now. Yeah, so I mean, it may change, but there may be like a broader logos then that would then, a logo, an logos, which would then define how our logos evolves over time.
Okay, so this logos is the species normative behavior, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So wait,
how
wait,
does
wait.
this-
Is this universal?
Yeah, across the species.
Okay, let's see here. So, across the species at one time, slavery was an accepted practice around the world.
Unless it then leads to its own contradiction or something. It was an accepted species, but it may not be accepted practice, but it may lead to its own destruction, and so it may not be the best for that for the species.
Or the species decides...
Under which the species flourishes, basically, would be the logos, is the conditions under which the species flourishes.
So if in the future the normative logos changes and suddenly the normative behavior is to molest children, then I guess everyone ought to molest children, right?
Well, let's suppose that we're some weird, animal species that, I'm pretty certain there are animals that do that, right?
Do what?
I don't know.
Or whatever. It's just, rabbits, for example, will do that, which is pet rabbits, and that's really weird and kind of icky to think about. But for another species, or say if we were to evolve in something completely bizarre and foreign to us, that may be under those conditions moral. Simply because it's in that I don't think that would be the case, but it's not inconceivable in an abstract sense that could be the case.
So moral according to who?
Well, according to the logos,
Your parents went out for
But doesn't the logos change?
yeah, but the point is that you then refer to an logos, under which,
What's an logos?
it's the logos itself has its own logos, which then,
And how are you supposed to know that?
it's well, you can, deduce that somehow. I'm not saying you would figure out how to do it, but that it would
And,
be out there.
and if that logos is different than that logos, then is there all the way down there's logos? Thing?
Yeah, until you reach some kind of universal logos, like maybe life itself has a logos or a purpose, and life is the inevitable result of the universe and so forth, and then the universe has a logos.
So in other words, you're a slave to what is.
Well, it's not a slave to. Well,
Yeah, there's an external, and it's.
it would be kind of the definition of an objective morality.
What you're describing is totalitarianism.
Also, it sounds like you don't have free will, actually.
Well, this is the point. You have a choice to either obey this logos or not obey it, and you could say, well, it's totalitarian, but
Well, if I don't obey it, then I contradict the logos, so I have to obey it, or else I will.
right. Well, remember, James, how you said that way back, even it's a totalitarian thing. If under a moral relativist stance or a nihilist stance, even that value of totalitarian versus non-totalitarian would have to. That would go out too. So, I mean, the whole concept of that there is something that you ought do that's that's above you in some sense. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of objective. Why you want to say that will lead to totalitarianism?
Yeah, it's slavery. I'm my own god. I decide what I ought do or ought not do.
Well, in that
It
case,
sounds,
maybe.
it sounds like you're actually a slave to your instincts.
No, I didn't say that. I just do whatever my instincts want me to do.
No, but what the is. Like
Oh.
the logos.
I thought you were responding to me.
No, it's
I mean,
wrong what
okay.
Johan said.
The whole point of an objective morality is that you have a duty to be
Right, it's that you're a slave.
to it. Yeah.
Right. You're a doulos.
Yeah. So you have this. It's kind of a weird consequence, but
this objective morality thing seems to fit real good for those who are part of the herd, who are slave-like by nature, who need to be told what to think and what to value. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of. You can call it slave morality if you want, but that's kind of the definition of an objective morality.
That's what it is.
That's not really a definition I've heard used.
It sounds like
it's not a
an
definition.
absolute more than an objective.
1 second, guys. Yes? Okay. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Had to talk to someone for a second. Say that again, Source 5.
It sounds like an absolute than an objective.
Well, that's the whole point is like saying, 1 plus 1 equals 2 is absolute, right?
Within its frame.
Within its frame, and this is within the frame of aughts, of all aughts. So yes, it is objective means there is an element of absolute there, so.
Objective means there's an element of absolute?
If something is objective, it's true, 1 plus 1 equals 2 is absolute for everyone, right? It's an absolute. 1 plus 1 equals 2 is an absolute.
If they don't know what 1 plus 1...
Not really,
if they don't know what 1
goes.
and 1 and 2 is, if they don't know what plus means, then no, it's not absolute.
But then they wouldn't know,
Yeah.
But I would think even a primitive species would understand, here is one rabbit, there's another rabbit.
Yes, but the
I now
concept of 1 hasn't been made yet.
They understand the concept of individuality.
Yes,
they can
yes.
see a rabbit, a tree. They may not use the language that you would use, but they understand the concept of 1, 2, 3, many. Some societies don't really understand much beyond many, because
they have no
just
use
don't
for it.
think of those. They have, yeah, exactly. Thank you. They have no use for it. So it could be 1, 2, 5, 10, many. And beyond that, it's irrelevant to them because they don't have a society that has any need for terms like thousand or million or anything like that. But they would understand the concept of something being individual, single. Like a rock, an alligator. There's a difference between an alligator is coming towards you and the alligators are coming towards you. So they would understand the concept of singularity and plurality. And I'm sure they would understand the concept between 1 plus 1 equals 2 is there's one alligator over there, and there's one alligator over there, so we are being attacked by 2 alligators. Not that alligators really attack like that, but...
So is morality objective or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Let's say
I wanted to bring
epistemically.
up-
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up something that's kind of interesting related to this. You were talking about everyone has to basically think all together. You were talking about totalitarianism. We've been discussing for a while on an evolutionary level why do we have sociopaths? Why do we have sociopathology? And it occurs to me now, thinking about this, that from an evolutionary perspective, having a sociopathology, having a sociopath, would be a survival mechanism for people not always following the same path. So if one of the things that makes humans as a species so successful is our adaptability, we are all over the freaking planet.
Couldn't psychopaths also be like a cork causing a separation?
Well, the thing is, I'm talking about sociopaths, not psychopaths, which is something different. But most sociopaths actually manage to work within society. They actually, even if they don't have the empathy that most people do, they have a logical understanding of you do not hit people or they will hit you back.
Sociopaths have empathy, they're able to turn it off.
Oh, well, okay. But I think you could...
Probably varying degrees of it. But
Well, yeah, like
Yeah.
I remember reading recently that chimpanzees don't have exactly empathy to things outside of their group, their family. That they can turn it off. That's why a chimpanzee can rip another chimpanzee to shreds, and they don't care. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that that thing I learned yesterday or the day before, that the other kind of chimpanzee, the crap, it's called the boon.
Bonobo.
Bonobo.
Yeah, that thing.
Bonobo.
That thing actually does have empathy for things outside of its family and would actually adopt other members of its same species and stuff. So.
Well, there's like a type 2 psychopathy which has to do with people who are born that way. You can see the difference between a brain that is sociopathic and a brain that's, quote, normal. And then there is type 2, which is kids and stuff who are abused for years, who go through a lot of trauma can develop a type 2 psychopathy. But as far as I understand,
that's actually the quick trivia. That's actually the distinction between sociopathy and psychopathy. Psychopathy is where you're born that way, and sociopathy is where you're conditioned that way over years of trauma and so forth.
right. I was a psych major a long time ago.
Gotcha.
So I only know a little bit about some of this stuff, but
Gotcha.
yes. But from what I hear, and I could be wrong, but sociopaths are always have the ability to have empathy, but they turn it off. That's
Yeah,
that's
see,
what I've
that
heard.
was not my understanding, but I could be wrong here.
I could be wrong too, yeah.
I've always looked at it. I'm going to have to look this up now that you've mentioned it, because I've always
Yeah.
looked at the sociopaths as people
Please
who
do.
are a little short in the empathy department, and there's various different degrees of sociopathology, and the psychopath is just being, how do I put it? It's usually the psychopaths that we see who have a completely disordered brain.
But you could
And,
still
occasionally
reproduce. You could still reproduce and pass on your genes as a psychopath.
Well, I mentioned that case, I think you were in the hangout, of a man who was diagnosed as a psychopath, and he married, he had a family and children, but he was very controlling, and his children and his wife obeyed him unquestionably. And as his children became teenagers, they started to, be teenagers, and he felt that they were going to go to hell because his psychopathology was tied into religion, which sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So he murdered his entire family. He murdered his children to save them from hell, and he murdered his wife because he thought it was the kind of thing to do since the children were dead. And then many years later, and then he disappeared, and people thought he was killed too, that this was a family attack and he was taken away or something. And then some 20 years later, they found him again because he changed his name, changed his life, because he married and had a whole new family. And I don't remember if he actually succeeded in killing this family or tried to kill a family again, because guess what? His kids were teenagers again.
Well, yeah, like that's the thing. Like
So he managed.
in a sense, like the chimpanzees and the bonobos, which are they're pretty much the same. They're almost the same species. They're just different
They're
subspecies.
subspecies.
Yeah. But
Or either they're
bonobos
subspecies, yeah.
but one is more
Yeah, bonobos-
empathetic than the other.
And those are the ones who are closely related to us.
But
But
just
by-
barely, just
yeah,
barely more.
right.
Like it's just so
But,
minor.
yes,
It's like
I know it. But
yeah. But like that. Could it be
in
like?
behavior? There's quite a bit of difference. Yeah.
Well, could it be, for example, could it
Genetics,
be?
not.
Well, could it be that the chimpanzees, the ones that we know as chimpanzees, could it be they were or ancestral, with the bonobos, where the psychopath brother and the non-psychopath brother, or parent or whatever, were the bonobos, as an example.
That's a little simplistic, but that could have been one of the things that caused, that certain traits that happened when they were separated. They were likely separated by other reasons.
Well, I think it's the Congo River.
Yeah. See, it was probably they evolved differently, but we've already seen that in perhaps, for instance, there's a baboon tribe that in baboons the males, they're the dominant males, and they usually control everything. And I apologies for getting the details, but I can find the reference if anyone wants it. There was like a hospital, I think, and they were dumping all their trash out, and the baboon tribe got into the trash and eating all the food and stuff like that. Well, the dominant males in this tribe, of course, pushed everybody away and got all the goodies. As a result, they caught human diseases, one specific, which I forget. I think I know which is, but I don't want to say just in case I'm wrong. And so all the alpha males died out.
Heh.
As a result, essentially the lesser males, the beta males and so on, took over the tribe. And as a result, the tribe became kinder, gentler, more cooperative. Okay.
It's kind
Now,
of
what's
interesting.
interesting.
So,
Yeah, it's very
so pretty
interesting.
much in that society, in a sense, a psychopath can rule.
I think
Right,
I
but
read
what-
about that actually.
Right. Now, what's very, very interesting about this is in baboons, the young males tend to leave their tribe and travel around, and they will find another tribe to join. And this is how genes are spread. So this is in baboons, this is how this species, how they get genes spreading around, so you don't get these little isolated groups that are inbred.
what is most interesting is as other males from other tribes joined this tribe, instead of bringing their anger management issues with them, they became like the other tribes. So this tribe, even though it has absorbed males from other tribes, is continuing to be a gentler, more, more.
So it's the AA tribe.
Less aggressive society.
So it's the
Yeah.
it's the AA tribe.
Yeah, and so this is what's very interesting, and it gives us an insight into our own evolution. Because this sort of thing could have happened to us. If the alpha males could have been killed off because they all went hunting or something, and leaving the ones behind to create a gentler society, what we would consider a more civilized society. And we see this happening in the baboon group, and the males that come from other tribes where they still have the aggressive alpha males fit into this society.
You know what that's similar to? You know what that's really similar to almost? It's like almost like America in a sense. I mean. Then you go to the whole shit that happened after, but pretty much people came here, they didn't bring their shit with them from their country until, after it became country,
Well, I would disagree with that, because one of the things the Pilgrims did, they came here for religious freedom, and one of the first things a lot of them did was outlaw religious freedom. And let's not forget the Salem witch trials.
No, I was thinking about when the country
Jamestown
was established.
Yeah, Jamestown. There we go.
I was
Jamestown,
thinking about
they all
when
came
it was
over.
established more than the earlier times.
Jamestown was kind of a screwed up story. They had what's his name? Why am I suddenly blanking out on this? Who was the guy who ran Jamestown? Started it.
I know who you mean, and I can't think.
Wasn't the guy's name in Pocahontas?
Yeah, Smith. John Smith.
John Smith.
Yeah, so he set the colony up, and then he had this, really good flyers over in England. Of course, there was no internet or electronic communication, so no one could come check on it. And he describes this wonderful colony over in America, and then everyone wants to sign up and give him money. And so then they come over here, and they discover it's a rat hole, basically. And, of course, it's all people who are expecting to have everything done for them, and so no one works. And so then, as a result of that, things deteriorate even further, and then they end up trying to hunt a nearby Indian tribe and try and take their stuff, even though the tribe gave them corn to grow and all that. And it was kind of a screwed up situation.
Did they resort to cannibalism?
I think they did it one winter. They didn't actually kill anyone, but they were digging up people who had died and tried to eat them because they were.
Would you say the objective morality in that situation, the logos has changed?
Yeah, I mean, under that kind of condition,
but this universal logos that spreads to all humans is only with this small amount of people, because I would guess their instincts are overriding their consciousness.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because your instinct is to survive any means necessary, and if
Right.
that means bigging up your daddy who died, like last month, okay, maybe that's a little bit too far, but still, eating him, because...
Right.
Well, I mean, in that situation, that may be like one of those, I think even Kant mentioned that there was wiggle room in his categorical imperative for,
So it's not binary like logic.
It's binary, but there are different settings you can put it in, basically.
Sounds more like fuzzy. Sounds fuzzy.
Well, it's not like there's no room for consequentialism, is what I'm saying. It's objective. They're basically think of morality like a function, and so under certain conditions, the function changes. It's the same under like the morality or the
instincts.
Either a principle, you have a sub-principle. Yeah, I mean, instincts are tied to morality, obviously, because that's kind of how we know about morality in the first place. It's part of our instincts, but under certain conditions, the logos may say something different than it would say in other settings.
If I can play devil's advocate for a little bit, because my understanding is, like, most Christians listening to what you're saying, they would say this is unquestionably a subjective morality that you're talking about.
Right.
And when you appeal to consequentialism this way, or the conditions determine the ideal choice to make, like, this is very much subjective in their view, that morality is an objective property of our decisions and the world itself, that it just exists unto itself, and all this talk that you're introducing, all these conditionals.
Well, the funny thing is that even in the Bible, there actually is precedent for this, right? So the Bible says not to lie to people, right? Lying is bad,
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we go to, like, say, the Egyptian story where you had that, that situation where Pharaoh was trying to kill all the infants, right? And then in that
Right.
case, there were a pair of midwives, and they were basically, they would give birth to the young, like, this, like, firstborn males or whatever. And then when Pharaoh's men would come around, they make up like a big BS story and explain, like, it was like an elaborate, they're BSing Pharaohs. They were basically lying to Pharaoh and then giving him a whole bunch of nonsense as to why why they weren't obeying, or why they weren't disobeying when in reality they were. And then it said, and then at the end of the verse, and God blessed them for it.
Well, I should say is it's not that certain specific rules are universal. It's more like, given a situation, there is an objective right choice to
Yes,
Or
make.
there's
that
a
would
more
agree.
probabilistic, I guess.
And
you'd
it
say.
may be in that kind of weird situation where, everyone's freezing to death and there's no food. That may be in that situation. Cannibalism of someone who has already died may not be wrong.
Well, when you say
that's
wrong is a property of our decisions unto itself, what does that even mean?
Assuming objective morality, I'm saying.
Okay.
That kind of situation may not be incompatible with objective morality. Just may be a weird situation, which, when you take ethics, you run across, they give you like 100 examples of, like, the TA or the professor brings up a weird example that everyone is super controversial and say, okay, so now guys, let's go in and investigate this, and everyone tell me what the best thing to do is in this situation. And
Well, what Christian apologists will generally say is that the consequences are not what determine the rightness or wrongness of a choice. Like, they hate consequentialism. So when you say
I'm a
things
little
like,
more soft when it comes to consequentialism. I think consequentialism has to be enveloped in a larger objective morality framework, but I'm not completely adverse to consequentialism.
I think, like, one of the reasons why they really don't like consequentialism, though, is because when they talk about morality, they're specifically trying to prove God exists. And when you start inserting consequentialism in, you're
You mean like the
basically
moral
saying,
argument?
yeah, exactly.
Well, the thing is, I don't like that because, even if I were an atheist, I could probably believe in objective morality, which, that's not the best argument, I don't think, so.
Well, and different people have different definitions of what an objective morality means. So I'm kind of just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Saying, this is what the Christians will say, because they're kind of the biggest proponents of this idea that morality is objective.
It's really kind of funny because this ties into politics, believe it or not, and this is, most Christians will be conservative, right of center.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so this is in my family, for example, we had this situation where me and my brother changed our political definition slightly. We really didn't just, we changed it. It was not so much a change as we added a prefix to our previous position, and the prefix was neo, basically. And so we had this situation where we were arguing things, neoconservatives tend to be more consequentialist, right? And occasionally this gets into kind of, stuff that other conservatives will not like very much, right?
Yeah.
And so you've heard of the neocon, paleocon, like, argument, right? Like, where they have, like, it's like a tension between them, and they sometimes get into, like, shouting matches with each other.
Give me an example.
Well, for example, like, the war in Iraq, I think, would be one model, or there are, like, what was it? Neocons kind of obey, or I think of, Lincoln's, say paleocons will be like, think of the Constitution as the 67th book of the Bible, right? Neocons would be more along the lines of Abraham Lincoln saying the Constitution is not a suicide pact. And so neocons will bend the rules in sake of a larger set of rules.
Okay.
So they'll have an objective morality foundation at the bottom, but it's like a hierarchy of values, right? And so in that, you are allowed to bend a lower value in the totem pole in favor of a higher value in the totem pole. Mm-hmm. And so, this kind of behavior tends to tick off paleocons at times. And so, even though the end results, they generally tend to share the same totem pole of values, but it ends up in such a way that the paleocon wants to obey all the rules on the totem pole, whereas the neocon is fine with bending the lower ones in the totem pole in favor of the higher ones. And so it is kind of interesting because this I mean, I've actually seen this, what you're saying, kind of play out with, some people being in favor of more accepting of consequentialism to some extent than others. So,
Well, the reason the reason why I see a lot of Christians really against consequentialism is because it means you have a source of moral behavior that's independent of God, and then the entire moral argument for God's existence just vanishes in a little.
I could argue that
they will really jump on you if you start pulling consequentialism.
Wait, Johan, I gotta hold this against you. I remember vaguely. Maybe tell me if I'm wrong. You mentioned with DPR Jones that your God was all loving.
Oh, like all good or something like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
how does that exactly work in your
How does that actually work with this?
Yeah.
Well, so my thing is, I could actually argue, because remember I'm a panentheist, right? I could actually argue that logos, remember, and James was saying, you're acting like the morality is outside of you somehow. Well, personally, and I wasn't arguing that because I was trying to set it up on a completely secular ground, I could also conversely argue, and the basis for you could argue that the objective morality would be the same either way, but based on my broader metaphysics, I would say that logos is like God's nature. That logos, right?
But isn't God technically everything?
Yeah, the whole.
That depends on who you ask, right there.
Okay, but isn't God creating? I mean, isn't God thinking of everything that's going on right now? I guess.
Right.
So he's thinking of bad things.
That's where the whole. Actually, you've heard of, and this is probably for a whole other discussion because it's kind of the interplay of morality and.
No, I mean that's just the weird thing.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's where I get the whole notion.
It's like you're solipsist and you're thinking of yourself getting hurt even though you don't want to be hurt. Like, why would you think that?
That's the $1 million question. I don't know entirely. I mean, I have that one video, Why There Is Evil, where I try and explain it's knowledge of good and evil related or something. But like that's just I mean, here's a good example. You have nightmares, right?
Wait, what?
You have nightmares occasionally, right?
Actually, I don't dream.
Yes, you do. Just roll with it.
Oh, fine.
We all do.
Okay,
yeah.
I do.
I have unpleasant dreams.
And you get hurt in your nightmares. That's a solipsist universe for you. It is weird, but like, why would your mind do that? But it is for whatever reason. So.
Okay, so you're saying God's a human?
Well, no, just that that analogy applies, I think.
But if God's all loving, why would he think about things that are not all loving?
It's an evil in that model is an absence of good.
Oh, why is love good?
Heh.
Why is love good?
Yeah,
Well, love would reduce
you guys just
entropy.
assume egalitarian ethics when you're arguing for good. Why do you just assume egalitarianism?
That's a good question. I had actually put a little bit of thought into
That's
this.
good.
And this is kind of my...
That's the exact opposite.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about this a bit, and I was actually... Here's a tentative answer, okay? Is that if you have inegalitarian ethics, you end up with a situation with it creates entropy in a sense. People are fighting with each other, right? And that reduces
fighting.
Well, because then you have less. If everyone's on the same side, then they're not expending as much energy against each other. They're now expending energy for, a system where everyone's working together is more effective than a system where everyone is fighting each other.
Effective for what goal?
Well, anyone's goal ultimately. I mean, if it's
Anyone's goal, really?
Let's look at a totalitarian example. Let's look at a totalitarian example where there is like an Ubermensch running the herd, right? Say North Korea, right?
Oh wait, we got a caller. Trollolin.
Yo.
Hello
Hey,
there.
cousin Troll, welcome.
Yeah, we got a troll.
Thank you.
What do you have to say, or any questions or any comments?
Oh, actually, not at the moment. Just let me set up for a bit, and then I'll get into it. Hang on.
Okay. Go ahead, Johan. What are you doing?
Yeah. So in the North Korea sense, you have an Ubermensch or a class of Ubermensch running the civilization, right? And as a result of this, they're actually causing, trouble in their. The people are depressed, and so they can't work as well. They don't function as efficiently, and so because of that, the government is not a major player like South Korea, which is more egalitarian, and they have they're an economic power and they have more clout in the world as a whole.
What's the problem?
And
Yeah, what's the problem?
Well, so the point is that one is more successful than the other, even
According to whose standards?
even to the Ubermensch standards.
The Ubermensch standards?
Yeah, the guy
But isn't the Ubermensch, whatever the Ubermensch says is law?
Yeah, but it's not beneficial for him because now he's isolated, or he may be attacked by Western powers because he's acting
So was
out.
Hitler.
No, but maybe he wants
Hitler
that.
lost though.
Yes,
No.
but Hitler killed himself, so he ended it his way.
Right, he didn't want it to go that way though. Remember?
Maybe the Ubermensch wants to be attacked.
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah. Maybe that's why.
Well, then we're back down to that
Well,
situation.
Castro died of old age. Has he died yet? He hasn't been attacked.
Yeah.
He's invading his country.
But his country is not very well off. He's not.
Is our country well off, man? Is our country well off?
May I play the role of the Ubermensch for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'll just say I'm
I'll
Castro,
overthrow you, man.
I'm Hitler,
I'll
I'm
overthrow you.
evil
Hitler was not
totalitarian
a
guy in
Ubermensch.
charge.
Hitler
So
was.
I don't care about the well-being of my people. I care about myself, and I've got a big palace with 100 servants and a new woman to have sex with every day. What do I care about the prosperity of the economy as a whole?
Well, actually, an Ubermensch would care out of an abundance of power, just not out of pity.
Yeah, it would reduce his abundance of power in the long run.
Well, maybe I am okay with just lots of power. I don't need lots and lots and lots.
Here's one. This is actually kind of interesting. I remember this is kind of related to this. It's a political philosophy. Leo Strauss is on tyranny, okay, and he had this conversation between I think it was a philosopher with Xenophon the tyrant, okay, and this philosopher, I think it was. Let me make sure it was the right one. I think Xenophon was the tyrant, and I think. Okay, hold on here. Maybe Xenophon was. No. It was Xenophon was the philosopher, and Hero was the tyrant. Heiro, and Xenophon was asking. Xenophon was from some other city, and he was visiting, and he was at the tyrant's palace, and he was dining with the tyrant, and the two got talking, and then Xenophon's like, "It must be wonderful being a tyrant here, right? You have everything you ever wanted, and you all this power, and then the tyrant is like, actually, no, it's not, because no one trusts me, and now I used to have friends, and now the friends are all gone, and then everyone around me is trying. I have to be suspicious of them all, trying to stab me in the back when I'm not looking, and so forth, and so he has all this power, but he's not really happy with it, and it's because of his tyranny that is causing him to be, causing him to lose power, or not be happy with his power, rather. And then Xenophon comes along and says, well, here's what you have to do, and this is going to make everyone like you, and then also make everyone, says that you actually are happy as a ruler, and that is to go and be good to people, and,
Why do you want to be happy?
Why do I care about other people? What if just being rich and powerful is happiness?
Well, his point was that it wasn't like for this example is that like it wasn't working. He was rich and powerful, but it was not making him happy in the end.
My question is though this. Yeah, but wait. I got a question a really good question. So, Rats, does God have to be happy?
There are cases where God is said to be sad or unhappy too.
Yeah, but isn't that anthropomorphism too? I mean,
but if you think about it from panentheism, it kind of goes both ways because you have a mind containing a mind, and you remember that one thing where like Jesus said like when you've done it on the least of these, you've done it on me or whatever, and so basically the idea there is when you're hurting X, you think it's just X, it's just some random person, and when you realize if it's panentheism, then well that's an extension of God, and so you hurt that person, you're hurting an extension of God, basically, and so God gets hurt in the process.
But still,
right? That's
still, why?
So yeah, it is kind of a anthropomorphization, but it's okay because in that sense, God contains all of their minds, including human or anthropomorphic minds. So
okay, that's a good explanation, but I frequently, get in discussions with people, and I try to point out that sometimes when you're talking about God being angry or God being furious or God being sad, you have to be careful what you're saying, because if you're talking about a supreme being that's beyond all of us, that supreme being doesn't have human emotions.
Right.
Well,
I know.
you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was
Jay,
thinking.
my question would be, why is God sad and stuff? Like, like we have, instincts tell us. It's instincts are the reason. Yeah, just lost my train of thought.
Right. Well, I would answer using Ratz's statement right there, explanation, that then God would be sad because we are all a part of God, so our sadness would be part of God's. Would that be okay, Ratz?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Okay,
And it takes care of the answer. Like I've thought about this before. If you're not thinking about from the Pentheist angle, it actually, it would make sense that, how in the world would a creator of a giant universe have any, human qualities at all, right? It seems very, not to say that it's, wrong, but it seems on the face of it very ad hoc and contrived, right?
Yeah.
And so
if someone's hurting an infant, it's hurting God?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how about 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 3?
That's a good...
Does that mean if I cut down a tree, I'm hurting God?
Well, a tree doesn't have feeling, I suppose. I mean, 1 Samuel...
Wait. Do trees
It's
have feelings?
probably one of the ones where...
Thus says the Lord, kill every man, woman, child, infant, donkey.
Remember, James, I'm not like fundamental.
Building a house for God.
Like, Bible was put together like...
Okay.
Where's a fundamentalist creationist when we need one?
Yeah. What about hurting? What about hurting?
You have someone you can shoot in the barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are some weird things that are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be frank, I have some, and C.S. Lewis actually has some of these where he wasn't with Samuel per se, but he had like something in the Book of Psalms, I think, where he was saying it was like wicked psalms or something, and he had some kind of internal conflict that he was wondering how to make sense of this with, like, he didn't quite jive with him. So, yeah, I mean, I have that occasionally. It's like just to be kind of frank, I don't have it all completely sorted out. I have chunks of it sorted out, but.
So it kind of sounds to me back to a few minutes ago. You're saying, like, if you want to be happy, then there are choices you should make that will make you happy. And they will objectively lead to the outcome of you being happy. That sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because that's still a
I don't understand the concept of God
reality.
being happy, though, because we are happy. So God thought of us, and we were sad. Then we become happy, and God's happy because we are thinking for God.
Yeah, our mind is part of God's, even if we don't realize it.
Right.
So why can't God just think that we're happy himself?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, like, you heard about this is kind of a cool little extension. I don't know if Jade's heard this yet. I had this in my Why There Is Evil video. Okay, so remember you had the concept of God being, we're all, our minds and what we experience are part of God's mind, what God experiences, right?
So are we God?
Part of God, I would say.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. So,
In a sense.
So, yeah. And so I had this idea where, and of course, not everyone would adopt privatio boning. That's obviously controversial, but if you just take that on board for a second, you get this kind of cool conclusion out of it. And, we experience evil, right? Like something bad that happens to us, or some tragedy, or even a natural disaster that hurts people, and that's evil.
But doesn't that also hurt God?
Not evil.
Let him.
Oh, God.
In this hypothetical context, right?
We do not experience evil. We experience things we don't like.
We experience an evil.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with that.
Yeah,
evil in a broad
But
sense.
it's a broad way of saying it, yeah.
The broadest.
Experience suffering.
I use that. We get into semantics sometimes, but I tend to use the word evil the same way that Ratz is mentioning it now. It's something bad that happens to you, not as objective evil, as in Lucifer
It's
or
not
the devil.
biblical evil. It's not the Christian
Right.
evil. It's just
It's
evil,
evil,
bad. I use it
bad
too.
Yeah. Okay, so.
It's just very bad. Evil is very bad to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we have, here's the thing. So let's suppose that, let's just kind of look at this kind of structurally for a second. So you have this conscious state, right? And the conscious state is looking at everything as though it's a priori or inside of its mind, right? There is no a posteriori to God. It's all internal to God, at least in panentheism. So then, now let's suppose that there's a portion of God's mind decides to experience something, say the knowledge of evil, right? And then, is having this thought of the knowledge of evil, this a priori concept in his head, right? And this sub-branch of God's mind then drops into like a lucid dream and experiences that same conscious state from the inside, right?
Okay.
And so then that same conscious state manifests as a nightmare with actual physical bad things happening, right?
Okay.
So you're saying God is just having nightmares, and that's the
hold on. Kind of, yeah, basically. Now, here's a funny part, though. Okay. Now, if privatio boni is true, and you argue against that, but that's a whole other. Just remember, I said take that on board for the time being, just as a hypothetical to play with it. Then the knowledge of evil is never by itself, right? Because evil is the absence of good in privatio boni, or the corruption of good in privatio boni, and so to have the knowledge of evil, you must also have the knowledge of good, right?
Yes.
And so therefore, to have this nightmare, you also have to have the knowledge of good. And so therefore, the reason there is evil in the world is because this sub-branch of God's mind wanted to know the knowledge of good and evil.
Oh, that's interesting.
Pretty cool, eh?
You said you made a video about that?
Yeah, it's why there is evil.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look
what's
at that.
What's actually pretty funny about this, and I didn't mention this in the video because I knew it was going to freak out like both my atheist and my funny base partly. Like my atheists would be like, this is a bunch of BS if they heard it, and my funnies would be like, you're of the devil if they heard that. But the entire, that explanation I gave to you is actually the original esoteric Jewish, i.e. Kabbalistic explanation for the fall.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. But what I also found interesting about your discussion there is there are some societies who have a mythology of a sleeping god.
Brahma.
Brahma.
Yeah, and we are more than that, but yeah, that we are in some of these, we are part of God's dream, part of God's imagination.
You know it's funny actually that this is
so why doesn't night terrors wake up God?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it does. Here's the video, by the way, if you want, Jade.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's cool. I will. That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a mind for. It's technically a philosophy video, but the whole thing. A lot of my atheist subs actually said they enjoyed it, even though they didn't agree. And it feels more like watching a science fiction movie, like on par with Inception when you get farther into it. So.
Yeah.
All right. You actually genuinely hold this view?
Yeah, that's the. I mean, it's very simple. The whole thing derives a kind of a Christian theosophy from just monistic idealism plus privatio boni, and so then when I'm trying to argue for like a Christian theology, I just have to set those, and then of course those are have problems in themselves. But if you set those up, then it's kind of cool because the whole thing just kind of falls out.
This kind of sounds like you're saying evil and suffering are the result of a subconscious metaphysical musing of God because he subconsciously wants to appreciate goodness more?
Or, well, no, there's this part of God's mind somehow ended up experiencing the wrong, like it made the wrong choice at some point.
Wait, so God's mind...
God's mind is fractured,
so God's
multiple
not constant?
Personality disorder?
Yeah,
well,
is God a schizophrenic?
I mean, not from his ultimate perspective, but like there's like a sub branch of things. You know how you can like create a
multiple personality disorder?
No, not thinking multiple personality disorders. I'm thinking more along the lines of a like a novel, right? You create like a hypothetical world with a whole bunch of hypothetical characters in it, right?
What's it based on?
It's based on your imagination or whatever,
but novels are based on experiences and things we see.
Right. Well, that's the whole.
They're not just based on just pure imagination.
Right. I know they're based on partially on experiences and so forth. I mean,
so
that's
what
the
did
whole.
God experience? Did God?
Well, what I'm saying is, it may be that just because we experience the, it's in our experience that we have to experience things before we imagine them. It may not be universal across the board like that. Like.
Right.
Like
and I would like to,
God just sort of widely imagines things, and we suffer as a result.
The thing is we are the part of God that decided to imagine that, and that's why we're in this screwed up situation. Basically, so in a sense, yes, it's God, but it's not like God is being blamed here, because the part of God that would be blamed would be us in a sense.
I never decided to go through a
not
tsunami or to get
not
smallpox.
Not consciously. This is
So
kind of
we
a
So you're telling me
subconsciously
I
decided to get
subconsciously
AIDS?
want to die? Is
This
that
is
it?
like this
Let's suppose
mental
that-
masturbation is
I
great.
know. It
It
is.
Like seriously, how much mental jumping jacks do you have to do to make this God thing work?
Well, no, no.
Well, it's an
this is
interesting,
I mean, it's a lot more interesting than...
intellectual exercise, I think, and I like that sort of thing.
Let's
And,
talk
Yeah,
about.
it's-
even if it's bull, it's
Oh, by the way, who was
and
that?
I will.
Talk about
One at a time, one at a time.
Hold on, let's talk about how Santa Claus gets to all those little houses in one night.
Right, but this is
Let's figure it out
consistent.
for now.
This is consistent though. This has like a
Santa
it's
Claus
like
possess-
a
Santa
We can
Claus,
hypothesize about that, come up with something consistent.
right.
Santa Claus possesses us.
It's actually been done. Believe it or not, it's actually been
Yeah.
done.
This is less ad hoc though.
Scientists
All you have
get
to.
Nice.
This is less ad hoc though. The point. That's the
Yeah.
point of it. It's
If
like
I-
it's
if
like
I
a.
have standards.
Well, it's simpler. All you have to go starting in from this is that, I mean, actually, even if you accept the greatest conceivable being definition, if you derive all of it from just that,
Greatest
you
conceivable
said it
being
right.
according to
Whoa. There's no such thing as a greatest conceivable anything.
If you do.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is,
I can think of a greatest conceivable chocolate bar. I bet it's not the same as your greatest conceivable chocolate bar.
I was
Right.
going to say
It may
St.
not be
Anselm is calling.
okay, what I'm getting at in terms of ad hoc is, and even I think you adopted like an atheistic version of idealism, right, James? Like the
I'm sorry, what's that?
Schopenhauerian. You
What?
adopted the Schopenhauerian view of evil, right? The view of the mind, right? Where it's a kind of
I'm beyond good and evil.
not evil. I misspoke. You believe the kind of Schopenhauerian view of the mind, right? So. Monastic idealism has its thing, and then there's privatio boni.
And get it right.
Yeah,
Nietzsche's advancement of double aspect theory.
and then you have privatio boni, and that has its own arguments for and against it. But then it actually has philosophic pedigree going back before Christianity and so forth. And so it's kind of cool when you put these two together, you get this kind of neat thought experiment, and you can.
Can I give you a parallel to what you're kind of saying?
Right.
It's kind of like saying, if I allow division by 0, then I can prove that 1 equals 2, and that any number is equal to any other number.
Yeah, I know,
So
I know.
when
I
you
know.
say, if you accept the idea of a greatest conceivable being, well,
Yeah.
you can prove anything you
I
want
was
once
saying,
you start
in
there.
a hypothetical, it follows very simply from the logic if you watch the video, but don't even forget about that entirely. Just start with the two premises, idealism and privatio boni, and you get all these weird consequences that when you play it out as a thought experiment.
Yeah, like a good example though, like if
Oh, no,
I
but-
allow, if I simply say it's okay to divide by 0, you can derive perfectly consistent logic that says 5 equals 7 and pi equals the square root of -1.
Right.
So that's you
It
can
is-
derive all sorts of interesting things if you start with a premise that's completely inconsistent and incoherent, is what I'm saying.
I know what you
So,
mean. I mean, it's pretty
Fun-
consistent when you see and it's pretty. I mean, it's whether or not you agree with the premises, but it'll make sense even if you don't agree with it. Is what I'm saying. So it'll make sense in a very kind of intuitive way.
All right.
I don't have to agree with the premises of something to enjoy the
Yeah.
argument. I mean,
Yeah.
there are lots of things
Yeah,
that I
sure.
will say,
That's
okay,
true.
By
I'll
the way,
accept this just to, yeah.
By the way, I think the Jade will I think enjoy this, and I think it was Anti-Citizen X mentioned this. He said that like the evil is in the subconscious, then right? Like we're part of God's
Right.
mind, so we experience it, right? Okay, here's the cool part, right? So if it's idealism, then there is not just it's all God's mind up top, but then we're like little subdirectors to that, right?
No, it's
Okay.
not idealism, man. Because what about all the Pacific Islanders off Australia here, man? Before Christianity, they're all right. Do you know what I mean? They had morality. There's
No,
a lot of data and proof
no,
for that.
no. I'm not saying like forget Christianity. Just to go on the pantheist model, the kind of abstract
Oh,
thing.
okay, right. Yep.
Okay.
So you have that, and then you have
Okay, yeah.
in the pantheist model, then each individual mind is like it's like a full like nesting Russian dolls, right? You start with God's mind, and inside there's a smaller mind, and so forth.
Right.
And so then you have that little subdirectory that knows the knowledge of good, and therefore it's in this environment, this VR with good and evil instantiating. So now,
What do you think of that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's my view actually. I'm an idealist, so.
Yeah, actually, I kind of agree with that idea as well.
Yeah. So
Just
now,
like you said there.
remember, Anti-Citizen X said that. So the evil was then in the subconscious, right?
Okay, well, before you go on to your evil and the subconscious
As
stuff,
a,
and before my eyes glaze over any further,
Yeah.
I bid you guys adieu. I have to leave.
Oh,
All
thanks
right.
for
Okay.
coming out
See
there.
ya.
But it was really
Okay.
good talking to you, though.
Yeah. Have a good one, James.
All right.
Okay. Goodbye, James.
Okay, bye.
Like
All
I said, I was kind of paraphrasing what you were
Yeah.
explaining, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
But
So it was funny you brought up subconscious though, because who's here heard of Carl Jung?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
we're not going to go into this because a lot of Jung's claims are just kind of kooky at the very least.
Well, we're doing this kind of as a philosophical exercise, Sam. This is we're driving the whole thing from philosophy.
That doesn't mean that it's not idiotic.
Well, yeah,
It's-
but did everything Jung say?
Not everything
Was
he
everything that
says.
Jung say? Yeah, was he at the point that we don't know what?
I mean,
Rabbit
I
said
think he's
yet?
going with collective unconscious, and
Yeah.
I mean, but that's
Okay, I
just
see.
speculation on his part. It's
That's
It's
what
like-
we're doing.
it's like-
We're
it's
doing
like-
a thought
it's a
experiment,
classic
Sam.
study
Sam.
in.
Is that like what Freud said, that like every woman unconsciously desires a penis?
No, that's not collective
That's
unconscious.
Collective
Oh.
unconscious is there are multiple archetypes and everyone's sharing it.
And
We're
trust
doing
me,
this
right?
as a-
lot of us feel sorry for you guys.
We're doing this as a hypothetical, Sam. I actually personally have some examples of.
I
things
mean,
that
I
seem striking.
I don't know if I'm only speaking for myself, but I don't really have that many, especially when talking about morality. I think it's almost sociopathic to just sort of engage in hypotheticals. because
the
it
topic kind of went tangential to morality. We're at a slightly different topic right
and
now.
also, and I mean, I also find that, if I let you just start on this hypothetical thing that I don't personally buy into at all, and most people don't, and it's a pretty kooky idea.
Well, Jade was.
I find that you get for like kind of fractal wrongness.
Right.
I'm
Well,
actually-
Jade was interested with the. Jade thought it was in. We're discussing an idea, even if not everyone agrees with it, because it's an interesting idea, even if it's a wrong idea or a wacky idea.
I've never
that's-
heard of it, so I just kind of want to hear what it is he's
collective
going to say
subconscious-
before I yell at it how wrong
Okay,
it
so
is.
the collective subconscious, and this is a lot of people probably yell at this. I mean, I actually want to do a video on this a while back, and I was actually I was actually trying to, because I have examples from my
Hang on
own.
a sec. Is mob mentality collective conscious?
Yeah, I was just thinking of ants.
No.
Actually, I was thinking
No,
of
no, no.
ants.
This is not Jung's idea.
Is
Jung's
this like
idea.
ants?
I'll give you an example to show you what Jung's idea. This is actually kind of a it is a very illustrative idea to show like this is one of the more interesting examples of this, but it's kind of crass actually. But it was kind of a joke in the psychology department when this thing first came out.
Okay.
There was Jung had a schizophrenic patient, and he was asked. He had this dream. The schizophrenic patient was telling him a dream where there was God's wiener dangling from the sun, spraying the earth and giving it love. And everyone thought this was like a big, ridiculous joke in the psychology. It was like almost politically incorrect. Everyone was like whenever they heard it, started laughing out loud, thought it was hilarious. Then it turns out that Jung, and this was a manuscript. It was like a Mithraic manuscript. There's some couple thousand years before, and it was the first time it had been published. It was a couple of months after this guy had this dream, and he was certain that the patient had never seen this because it was even if he had, first of all, it was like after he had this, and secondly, it was something really arcane that was only like certain specialists in, anthropology or archaeology knew about it, and Jung got a hand of it, and then he discovered that there is this solar phallus man archetype in the Mithraic text, and it was identical to what the guy was dreaming about. And so he was saying this was an example of the collective subconscious of everyone having the same.
Oh, okay, right.
It's
So
kind
you
of
mean,
weird.
so you mean I secretly have a dream of the sun having a giant penis and shooting things on the
And the reason you have it is not because your mind produces it, rather it's coming out of this archetypal level, which is shared by everyone, which is.
Well,
spooky.
yeah, but that can also be explained away by the fact that as much as human society has changed, it's remained fairly static with respect to our biology. And this is sort of explained away by the universality of genetics. We're
Yeah,
so
some
similar
Some of these were super. I actually have one, and I was actually wanting to do a video on this, or I was actually considering
But
not
this
doing a
is-
video on this because
this is classic. This is why I said it's classic confirmation bias. Because if you can make it fit, if you
can make it fit.
do
There's
enough-
some you can make it fit, but the thing is that it's well, okay, and this is I'm speaking for me here because sometimes the thing does, you just take it as it is. It makes more sense than if you say like I had some examples, and I have really weird dreams. I've always had really weird dreams, and I had a couple really interesting examples that were like even more stick out than that, and they were like so precise. Here's one example. There was I had this dream. I've never been outside North America before. I've been to Canada, but I was dreaming that I was outside London somehow, right? And I had this weird dream that I was like 16 or 17, I think, when this happened. And there were these pair of twins outside of London, and they had some kind of atavistic gene which caused them to become giants. And I mean, like really huge, like 14-foot tall giants, right? And
I don't think that's what atavism means, but go on.
No. In the dream, there was some kind of like hidden gene in the human body that had not been activated for like thousands of years or something like that, and it caused this.
Okay.
I'm giving you my dream, just as is. And they're twin brothers. They're 14 feet tall. They're outside London, and their names were Gog and Magog, right? And at first I thought, okay, obviously I got that out of Revelation, right? And I just
Are those names from Revelations in the Bible?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
Assuming that there's
Okay.
significance to dreams, and I'm
well,
not.
hold on.
convinced of that at all.
Hold on. Oh, crap. What I was going to go for was we then go to. I then started, writing my novel series, right? And I have these. I had a fantasy component to it. I was trying to blur science fiction and fantasy. I'd never before been interested in, comparative mythology or anything like that, and much less, the extent that I did when I started researching it. And so I figured, I just want to do it because I want to do my homework, so I don't tick off my fantasy audience when they read my books, right? So I researched this giant race, right? Giants in various comparative mythology, and then I run across this little obscure, like a little local legend or myth from London about a pair of 14-foot tall giants, or twins, who are named Gog and Magog. I never before seen that in my life. And I'm like, when I saw this, I'm like, what? Say that? I'd read it like 3 times, and I'm like, I'm hallucinating here. And just like it's
All this is telling me is that you ate something very funny before you went to bed. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, and I dreamt I was having
there's not a
playing
universal.
poker with George Washington too. So
I had a dream that I was a spider and I got into a duel and had magic powers and dueled with another spider.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I
Doesn't mean
secretly want
anything.
to be a spider. It just means
Right.
that my brain was
Sam.
flushing through all
Sam.
of this stuff.
What I'm getting at is, yes, I have like wacky dreams, like the most bizarre, and then most of them are, I usually just take my dreams as gibberish, right? It's like I'm like, well, that was fun, like they're fun gibberish, but they're gibberish. But like every once in a while, I run like this one example. You wouldn't expect that same gibberish to show up in some little arcane, local myth or whatever.
Why do you ascribe any sort of significance to these dreams when we know that dreams are very much chemically dependent?
Well, because remember, if you look at it from a materialist angle, I'm looking at it from an idealist angle. I don't see the chemical explanation as.
Well, then why is it that you can induce different types of dreams and you can induce different types of dreams based upon different substances? For example, if you take alpha brain, which is a series of compounds that is developed by a company called Onnit Labs, it's been proven that you have lucid dreaming due to the firing of neurotransmitters.
Right.
That's the hypothesis, at least. But
yeah, I'm not saying that this is I'm not saying that this is some kind of mutually exclusive explanation. I'm just saying that it's.
And there's also the recent
sides of the same.
There's the recent finding in the journal Science where they were able to tease away what the contents of dreams were based upon brain activity during sleep and they found and they could predict what people's dreams were just looking at brain activity.
Well, let me put it let me try and set this up for you so you can think of it kind of a different way, right? So you're looking at this chemically, right? And that's a valid way to look at it. And yes, dreams are chemical and can be induced chemically. But then, and let's say you can then look at science as a whole. Chemistry is part of science. Neurochemistry is part of science. You can look at science either an idealist lens or a materialist lens, right? Same thing. It's just how you look at it, right? So, let's say the collective subconscious, you could deduce something of that from just straight up, deduction from monistic idealism. It kind of comes out. It maybe doesn't necessarily have to, but
Is there
it could
point
make
to
a
this?
very simple. The point is that if you look at idealists, it's a very simple explanation for it. And so what you're giving me if you as a materialist talking to me as an idealist, you might think this is simpler, whereas I'm saying, no, of course it's simple. There's a very simple explanation. There is a collective subconscious, and it just follows from the fact that the world is idealist.
Well, I mean, mine has the benefit of evidence, of course.
Well, mine was based on evidence too. It's just the primary evidence of consciousness, right? That's all you need to deduce idealism, and so it's.
I mean, but mine uses science, and as we know, science is a much trusty methodology.
This is philosophy, and philosophy is more trusty because science emerged from philosophy. But.
Yes and no.
I
I disagree wholeheartedly because of the fact that we have cognitive biases. You can't deduce the structure of an atom. You have to actually test it.
Right, you have to do that, but I'm saying very, very generic things about the world. Right, so...
And when you try to be generic about things, that's often when you make the most stupid statements. That's generally across the board. I mean, I do it
maybe.
all the time.
Right.
And I'll say stupid stuff.
But, generic statements are also what gave where, the scientific method was kind of based on generic statements. So what I'm getting at, I guess, is like...
scientific method is based on methodology.
The methodology...
That's so in the title, scientific method.
The justification for the methodology...
How do you think scientists do science? Is my...
Well, they compare theories against data and falsify.
Again, I mean, this is not...
They falsify hypotheses.
No, that's not even... I mean, it just comes down to this. It's all about testing. Can you test it? That's how scientists do science. It's all limited by tests. And it's a very, very complex idea. But the whole idea is that you have to test the consistency. If it does not hold, it does not hold. It's not the idea. They're not constructing these huge paradigms. They're actually just constructing consistent tests that measure something in a specific context.
Right.
This is actually kind of a similar thought process I've had about what science is. Like, it's not enough to just explain things. You have to be able to predict events. And that's where the testing comes in, is do your predictions come true in some capacity?
I mean, Johan, saying this thing that I think, therefore something thinks... I forget. You said idealism, right?
I think that's Descartes. That's I think, therefore I am. I think. Right.
Therefore I think.
I mean, the issue is that the way that I see it is my view on dreams, which I'm not saying that I have a 100% answer by any means. I don't pretend that I have any certainty on it. But the benefit of my view is that it's actually producing predictions that are testable, whereas yours is just sort of this amorphous philosophical argument, which has the benefit of never being falsified.
And you cannot use it. You can't use it. You can't predict it.
Well, for example, I mean, let's take Jung at his word for a second. He actually based Jungian depth psychology on that. Like he actually had a kind of a science to this in a sense. Like he would, not a rig. It was more like a soft psychological science. But he actually had patients from all over the world, and they would come in and give him his dreams, and then he was able to predict things about study their psychology about this, and actually produce useful things for psychology based on dream archetypes that you would see in people all around the world. So it had some
practical application is there from interpreting dreams?
Well, it's therapy, for example. That's what it was for. It was used for therapy.
And you've seen the statistics on therapy, right? I assume because
is it not very benefit? Is it like you saying what? No,
well,
not
I'm saying that the most efficient, the best ways, Jungian and Freudian therapies are among the worst types of therapies.
A woman wants a penis. That's pretty much what I remember.
No, you strive.
What was it?
There's a lot to Freudian psychology. There's a lot to Jungian psychology. But when you look at the statistics, more scientific cognitive behavioral therapy methods are the most effective at helping people. So your view is nice if you ignore all the evidence.
No, I'm not saying it's not about ignoring the evidence. It's entirely compatible with the evidence. It's just a different dimension to looking at them. I remember I said they're not mutually exclusive in any sense.
That's kind of a pitfall to fall in. Like, nobody cares what you think is the explanation. All we care about is, does your explanation give us predictive power in our actions and our decisions?
Does it
That's
matter?
the thing that matters.
Let's just try and predict the dream from, you could predict a general dream which may be similar because we have same genetic factors, across the board as humans. But you wouldn't expect names like Gog and Magog.
I mean, this would be nice if we're.
Can I have Can I ask a question?
Rats,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have to be honest.
Or
Okay, I have a question for Jonathan because I'm pretty sure I can predict a dream if I follow you all day and put thoughts in your mind. So you'll probably dream about it in some way or another. How do you know your dreams? Your dreams are not just fragments of stuff you've heard around the day, and then when you search for it, you found all kind of cool stuff that relates to it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I had never seen that before. No, maybe you could say that I did see it, and I had.
But you did in the Bible. You said so yourself.
No. What I'm saying is, I thought it was from the Bible, but it wasn't. It was something completely disparate. It was actually.
Okay. Afterward, you've seen it in another place, but first you heard those two names in the Bible, so they could have come in your dream from the Bible.
Right, but what's the chances of them corresponding to a pair of twin giants that live outside London, right?
I don't know.
That's the freaky part.
Once you look for it, you'll find all kind of stuff in the internet.
Right. Well, this was. Was not just any. I guess what I'm coming across here is remember I said that depending on how you look at it, it can either be you think you have a simpler explanation, whereas I think I have a very simple explanation. What I'm saying is it is not to be like an offense or anything because you're just trained to think this way, but when you say this is the simpler explanation, you actually come across like Agent Scully kind of.
What? I don't see.
Talking about Sam. Not Roman, but
When did I say that parsimony is the only determining factor of an explanation?
It's not, but you were saying the better explanation. Usually, Occam's razor. When you say the better explanation, and you usually, in one way or another, referring. Occam's razor is a part of it, right?
Could I usually
not always.
It depends on the explanation. Don't mischaracterize what I'm saying.
Right, I know, but
in this specific instance, you're injecting your own opinion into something rather than looking at observable facts.
And can I throw something
This doesn't contradict observable facts.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. When you talk about this is something I absolutely don't know, but it would be interesting to look up. When you, for instance, throw in the name now, the giant twins living outside of London, I don't know. But when you look at the names of Gog and Magog, before I would have to consider that being some sort of subconscious kind of thing, I would want to look into linguistics, into the development of human speech, because we know that there are certain syllables that, come first in babies and things like that. So is it possible that certain syllables, certain sounds,
what was it? Chomsky, I think. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'll give you another example.
Chomsky didn't do work on that.
He didn't do work on that. I'm thinking someone else. Let me give you another example.
We can name drop. Let's just actually talk the issues. To be honest.
Okay, let me give you a different example. It would be very difficult for anyone to generate from only genetic basis at all, because all the elements involved were science fiction, right? So I had this one dream when I was like 15 or so, where I was like some kind of like secret military base, and down there it was like some kind of like not post-apocalyptic, but it was like you got the sense like World War III was going on outside, and it was like some kind of futuristic war. And anyway, at the bottom of this place, I find this mech suit, right? Like a fully fleshed out, not like kind of like a cyborg suit, but like it's more like metallic frame over your body. And then the wrists had lasers on them, right? It's kind of like the Iron Man suit, right? It's like years before Iron Man. Then later on in the dream, there was this. We were trying to get out of there, and there was this. It looked like a giant, like it was like the size of a whale. It was like a flying robot, like shaped like a leech, right? It had this moved by this undulating motion, right? And so those were the elements of why it's relevant. Is 10 years later, I then go to the movies and watch the Avengers, right? Who's here seen the Avengers?
Oh, you're talking about that thing that looks like a...
Yes, exactly. I was sitting in the audience and I'm like, holy crap, that's my dream. Like, where did that come from?
And what
Might I
about
say
manga?
knights in armor?
Yeah.
Not to say that that's the case, it's that,
I know.
There's a
just-
million of those in the mecha manga and anime,
What?
Right.
and all kinds of other shows.
Yeah,
How about
right. And
the?
also,
yeah, I didn't
remember,
watch much
most of us-
cartoons growing up. I was,
Okay.
But this is, I mean,
But
I just
knights
don't
in
have any
armor,
interest
knights
in
armor.
most of this.
Remember, we all
Yeah.
grew up with this idea.
the reason I was
of
bringing it
knights
up is
in their
because I was
metal
going to show
suits.
Jade something.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, but for all
Yeah.
we know, and I'm not accusing you of this, you could just be making this up.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not.
Well, I
should
know, but you could. This, I
It
mean,
could be. I could be.
There's
so
very
that's
easily-
why-
two
Well,
things
this-
to say on this. Like, first off, your memory is not nearly as static as you think it is. Your memory is actually dynamically rewritten on account of events that you experience along the way.
Right.
So, first and foremost, you said you dreamt this 10 years ago. No one cares at that point. Your memory of that is now a completely bastardized, rewritten
Not
version of
all
what
of
it
it. I mean,
truly was.
There were. I mean, you can remember the big features of a dream without remembering all the tiny details, and these were.
And
these were
that's
big-
the point.
these
Your
were the big
mind will
features.
fill in the details on account of updated information. as
These
you
weren't the
progress.
details, though. These were the details. These were like the big. These were the big things.
Maybe,
that, like, stuck out.
But you
You
Yeah.
think it is, but frankly, you probably is. You can be sincere and honest in 100%, and I still cannot trust your memory in any regard in this kind of
Yeah,
discussion.
I can tell you I remember stuff solely because my siblings told me about them and not because
Exactly.
I lived them, and yet I remember them because they told me about them so many times.
This is actually something you can replicate in psychological experiments, is inserting memories into people simply by explaining to them what you
Yeah.
think should remember.
I mean, well,
And
the thing was,
you do
I had
this
forgotten
dynamically
about this.
with yourself.
I had mostly
Every time
forgotten.
you tell this story, you're even just to yourself, you're changing the details, whether you
I
realize.
never
Right.
told my story to myself. Even I remembered it, and then
Every
thought
time
about it
you
for the day.
remember it
Oh,
to yourself,
it's-
you're going
Just
to
the next
change
day.
that.
Just the next day.
Yeah.
Just the next day. And then the point is, I wasn't like trying to remember it in the theater or anything. I just like sit down there and want to enjoy a video, and then at the end of the video, I'm like, what?
And that's
Where did that
exactly
come from?
when your memory got rewritten.
But why
Yeah,
did
there are a
it? Why
lot
did
of
it rewrite?
Too.
I mean, but this
That's
is
an
just
awful
kinda
lot of
silly, to
coincidence.
be honest, because
Yeah, can I
we
say
haven't
something?
proved anything.
Right.
I mean, I
I'm
would
not
love to have
asking
a
you to
dream.
believe it.
I
I'm
would
not
love to
asking
have
you to
a.
believe it.
I'm in the
just-
middle of a
was-
sentence.
Go ahead.
Can I
Well,
say
I was gonna say-
something here about
Oh, sorry.
memory just
Go
for a
ahead.
moment?
No,
Okay,
finish
so
my
that's
thought.
okay.
Sorry,
I
I was
actually
gonna
remember. I actually remember
Sorry.
some things that happened. I actually remember some things that happened when I was 2 years old. Not very many, just a few. And I know the date exactly because one of my memories is of going outside in my little snowsuit and digging a hole in the snow and building a little fort. And I was so happy that I had this little fort. Now, why that is such a strong memory is, and why I know I was 2 years old, is because I grew up in Long Beach, California. It only snowed once. Okay, now, the next thing I wanted to say, but what I'm trying to say is there is stuff from when we were kids that we remember, because when I was 17, we were having a family discussion, and my mom mentioned about how when I was about 3, I lost a little stuffed animal or the stuff, I think it was a clown or something, on a bus. And I had completely forgotten about that. And later, when I went to bed, before I went to bed, as I said, I started to think about that. All of a sudden, the entire memory came flooding back to me to the point where I had tears in my eyes because as a little kid, I cried and cried and cried because I lost my little, whatever it was. So my mom's mentioning that incident brought that whole thing back to me. I mean, vividly back to me like I was a little kid. So memory is really interesting. There's stuff we've picked up when we're so young that it doesn't stay in the upper levels of our consciousness. It's buried way back there. So we don't know. I mean, you don't know if you weren't introduced to something mechanistic way back then. And to me, the idea of a man in a metal suit, comes from knights in shining armor, and
It was a
to
robot.
upgrade it.
Could be Fallout
Yeah,
3.
but
You say that now. If we asked
child,
this conversation 5 years ago, you
Right.
wouldn't have
No,
that
I-
detail.
What is
I
it,
remember-
Transformers?
I remember
Wouldn't a
it
small
wasn't.
child, wouldn't a small child seeing an image of something like that think of it as not being a person in there unless somebody said, oh, That's a suit people wear. All I'm trying to say is there's all sorts of little things in your mind, and I actually remember a thought process that I went through when I was about 3, and I remember it because it was very, very vivid. And one of the things I remember is that I was crying and I was upset about something, and people didn't know why I was upset. And I remember thinking that I didn't have the words to explain why I was upset. I didn't even have the concepts at that moment to explain why I was upset. So we have all these little things tucked into our brain. We even have reasoning that we've done at a very early age that is incomplete. And I've actually sort of experimented with my younger cousins with this and, dealing with reasoning. And so we are actually at a very young age are starting to learn to reason and put 2 and 2 together. The problem is we're so little we come up with 5 or 6 or 7 or 24. So you could have seen a picture of a knight, and thought that was something mechanical, like a robot, not realize that was a human suit. And as far as lasers or anything like that, well, I grew up watching tons and tons of Westerns, and in your mind you update things to like where, okay, in the modern era they wouldn't have guns, they'd have lasers. I'm just, giving a possible explanation for this. Because I do this, I have very, very vivid dreams. I'm actually there in the dreams. It's really cool. And when I wake up, one of the things I try to do is I try to put together, it's a game with me, where did those images come from? And it's really interesting because I'll lie there and I'll think, okay, and I will be able to put together most of it from a movie I saw, a TV show I saw, a video I saw, a book I read, a magazine I read, something that happened that I saw out in the street. And what my subconscious does in these dreams is it creates these stories built of all these little bits and pieces of stuff that I have experienced. And I think this is a great deal of fun for me. Not only is the dream fun, but then I wake up and I start analyzing it, and not in, does this mean some deep thing? Because no, I'm a storyteller. This is just who I am, the way I think. And figuring out where all these little bits and pieces came from. I'll be like, oh, I saw that cop show. Yeah, or, oh, I saw that's up from that commercial, and I put all these things together into this really massive, wonderful narrative that I actually then get to experience.
Gotcha. I do that too. I mean, break down my dreams oftentimes in terms of, the content, and I find, chunks of movies and books and so forth blended in. It's just every once in a while I run across this stuff where a lot of times I run across, I have, kind of a series of dreams where the content in them is like just out of, some of it may be out of a movie, but other parts are out of nowhere I can remember. Like I'm trying to think, where could this possibly come from? I assumed, usually before I not to, say that I don't know, therefore the collective subconscious did it, but I usually just assume it's, just my brain coming up with random stuff sometimes, that the details that don't fit in are random stuff, but occasionally I run across stuff years later, I see something, I'm like, I have a pretty visual memory, I can, maybe I don't remember details of action, but I can remember images in my dreams that, I could probably draw them again if I had to.
I gotta burst your bubble. As strong as you think your memory is, it's not.
Can I speak for a second?
I should probably make a dream journal. Go ahead, Sam.
Rats, I think we both ran over Sam, so please let
the show is about to end.
Well, right.
Okay, well,
let it continue for
we do final
an
statements and
extra
we'll
half
continue this
hour.
after.
Go ahead, Sam.
But so my whole, and I mean, have you ever taken any social psychology or read about it at the very least? Because I mean, you seem to approach this from a very naive view in terms of understanding how easy it is to fool people.
I actually have a video related to this topic.
God damn it! I'm in the middle of a sentence and I get interrupted again.
I apologize. I just wanted to say. Go ahead. I apologize.
Go ahead, Sam.
But are you familiar with the practice of social engineering, and have you ever done any social engineering yourself?
Yes. Lots.
Do you know? Well, do you know what social engineering is? Essentially, what it is it's just using subtle psychological tricks to fool people and to get them to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. And this can be as grandiose as getting people, getting someone to do something they would never normally do, just because you plant the right psychological cues. Or it could be as subtle as getting a bartender to give you a free night of drinks by reminding him of some psychological cue. And anyone who hasn't ever done this in their life, I would say they don't have a full grip of how easy it is to fool someone. And when you realize how easy it is to fool someone, you realize it's really easy to fool yourself. And if you look at any study on cognitive dissonance, it's the exact same way, where people will try to square the circle because neurons that fire together wire together, and everything has to fit into neural networks that all go together. So the brain has to actually change the connections for you for you to actually form so that you have coherent belief structures.
Right. I mean, and there are cases where I'm pretty certain I have actually changed my memories. You know, I remember not remembering something, and then I remember thinking I filled the details in, and then I realized I probably did this. But this is probably why, and I'm probably going to do this from now on. I had actually a dream journal going for a while, just so I could get all this stuff fresh off, and I could look at it more. But I think that's why I'm probably going to start a dream journal, so I can get it before I am able to change the details
the issue
myself.
I don't think we ever. I don't think you can actually establish that there's anything significant about dreams, and I would argue that there's a fairly strong scientific argument against there being significance of dreams.
From what context, though?
From neuroscience and from psychology.
But from is that from within an idealist or a materialist perspective? Because you
from
see,
an evidence-based perspective.
Right, but if you're putting that into one ontology versus another, that can cut both ways.
Not really. I mean, when we look at if your statements are to be true, then dream-based therapies would be more effective, and statistically, they're not.
Okay, that's something to consider, I suppose. I'm not saying it's only dreams that are
to consider. I mean,
if
your view isn't falsifiable, then.
Right. What I would falsify with it, the way I would test it, I think, would be if I got a dream journal and then compared this on a statistical level, what's the likelihood of then run across something that I've not seen before that shows up in the dream.
What's your control?
Control would be the person who I played.
There is no control. That's not a scientific viewpoint.
Hold on. There would be a way to do this. I'm certain. I have to think about it for a bit. That's all.
Well, yeah. Can we go with final statements?
The control. I think would be.
You got 5-second final statements.
Okay.
Okay, I'll pass. Let everybody else go.
Yeah. We can continue in the after show in 10 minutes. So, Sam, final statement.
Do I have to quote a rap lyric again?
I guess if that's what you want to do.
The great warrior poet Ice Cube once said.
Let me see.
Go ahead.
Warrior poet Aubrey Marcus. That dude's awesome. Follow him on Twitter. Owner of. What am I gonna do? I'm off the top of my head. Let me see. Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with. All right.
Is that your final statement?
That is my final statement.
Okay.
Wu-Tang Clan, in fact, ain't nothing to fuck with.
I'm not certain. I think I may pass on the final statement because we jumped on all kinds of topics. We start with objective morality, and we go into religion type of stuff, esotericism, then we go into Jung, and then... So, yeah, I'm going to pass on that.
Okay, who's next?
I guess that leaves me.
Yeah.
You want a final statement on morality or a final statement on dreams? Okay. Well, I'll leave a note on his dream stuff. And Ruma made a very important point that you will remember things based on what people tell you after the fact. Your memory is not nearly as static or vivid as you like to think it is. Nobody's is. It dynamically rewrites itself as you experience new information. This is a demonstrable fact of your brain. And even if you did happen to vividly experience something and then see it again in your life after the fact, so what? Coincidences happen. Who cares? what is the significance of this? You're trying to insert this idealistic view of reality based on, gee whiz, I saw a coincidence. You know,
That's
really not how the world works.
That may be the control, is to see
way.
what would not, if it was not a coincidence, what the likelihood of the coincidence is, and if the coincidence starts to deviate from. So, if it becomes extraordinarily
or I guess
improbable, then
the way I was going to say it, I just remembered how I was going to phrase myself, is even if your concept of this idealistic world is correct, you're basically saying the only way it will manifest itself is in terms of coincidental experiences and dreams in your life years after the fact, of pointless, trivial aspects of movies and Iron Man. That's basically what you just boiled down to, is your proof of the existence of this idealism. And I will simply say that's not good enough for me to really be compelled. Sorry.
I use much stronger arguments when I go with idealism. I usually just bring that in like after the fact that someone already is an idealist. So.
Okay, so
I think we're drifting away from final statements.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So that was my final statement there.
Jay, do you have any final statements?
Um,
Oh, hey, James, you're back.
I have to, I actually think it went really well, and it was nice talking to everybody. And that's about it. Except for Cousin Troll there. So anyway, good night, or whatever time of day it is, wherever you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
So please wait 10 minutes, and we'll be back in 10 minutes to continue whatever the hell the after show will bring. So see you then.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.